one side there. Okay. Let's see. So general structure here is going to be cortex, right? Cerebral cortex. And so these bands of white fibers coming off of here is white matter. Is called what?
Corona radiata.
Nice. Corona radiata, yep. And when we're looking at the midline, what did we call this band of fibers here? White fibers. Corpus callosum. So when you're looking at this slice, you can see it continuing here. So in these fibers, corona radiata, a branch of them come and shoot across the midline. That's your corpus callosum there. Let's see if I can find another one. That's a good example.
Is it the sepal nuclei? Trying to find
Yeah.
I had a hard time trying to figure
Yeah,
out
so
what it is.
along the midline, sort of on the other side, like lateral to the fornix, you can find a gray body there. That's septal nuclei.
Is it on that one or?
Yeah, this is septal nuclei right here. Okay, so it's close to the midline, just lateral to the fornix. Cool. All right. Let's see if I can find a good example of this one. Remember how we sliced? What did we slice through? What landmark did we use to make this slice? It's a commissure. So here it is right here. So on the midline, it just looks like a dot. But now that we have sliced it, you can see the fibers continue across the midline there, which is characteristic, right? I mean, by definition, that's what we should be seeing, because a commissure is a band of fibers that goes across the midline from one hemisphere to the other. So that's just seeing how that stretches across the midline there, so anterior commissure. Okay. As these corona radiata come down, some of them are part of that descending pyramidal tract, right, the descending motor pathway. And part of that is this internal capsule. And so this part that goes, so see how this is a real solid white all up in here? One of these come down through here and kind of breaks up and doesn't look as solid. That's your internal capsule. He didn't point this out, but this very hair-thin band right there, see that? That's the external capsule, and I pointed out just as a landmark, because if you can find that and you can find your internal capsule, then the part in between that is your putamen. Okay, so that's putamen. On the other side of that, closer to the midline, and kind of peeking into the lateral ventricle here, is the caudate. So if you can find your lateral ventricle, the first body of the first nucleus of cell bodies basically running lateral from the lateral ventricle is going to be your caudate, internal capsule, putamen. He had mentioned that the caudate and the putamen together are called what?
Striatum.
Striatum, nice. So we've got putamen, and then going down from that, which is kind of mixed up a bit with the internal capsule, but that's which structure? The striatum. So the striatum is going to be the putamen and caudate together. If we consider them together, we call them the striatum. If we can take, there's another structure in addition to caudate, putamen, and what else make up the basal ganglia? Globus pallidus, nice. So that's not as obvious a gray body of cell bodies, because the globus pallidus has cell bodies, but also lots of fibers kind of running through it, and it shares lots of connections with things. And so it doesn't look like a gray body like that, like the other ones. But basically, if you can find the putamen and your internal capsule, more medial to that here is going to be your globus pallidus. And together, if you take the putamen and globus pallidus together, what do we call those?
Substantia nigra.
Nope. Lentiform nucleus. So if you want to jot down the notes, he's got it up there. So he points out caudate, putamen, globus pallidus, but putamen caudate is striatum. Putamen and globus pallidus is going to be sticking away, but lentiform nucleus. Okay. We bring it up just because sometimes you'll see them referred to any combination of these in the literature. If you're reading through articles and stuff, you might see them referred to lentiform nucleus, and you just need to know, like, okay, that's putamen and globus pallidus. You know, you can narrow it down like that if you know. Okay, but you mentioned substantia nigra, and he had mentioned that these structures of the basal ganglia caudate, putamen, globus pallidus share connections with the substantia nigra. You can't see it on the slice, but he did mention that it's sort of embedded within the cerebral peduncles. So the first day we had looked at the ventral side, and we said that this band of fibers here is the cerebral peduncles, and up inside there somewhere is the substantia nigra. You can't see it in the slice, but it's in there, and that's what he was referring to. That's what shares connections with these basal ganglia structures. Questions?
You said the external capsule was this
thin.
So what was the internal in relation to that?
It's let me orient myself here. So that's the thin line, and it's going to be a broader but more like speckled. You can't see it too well in here. Actually, you kind of can, but the internal capsule almost has a marbled meat, like marbled fat, like in a steak, kind of that marbled fat look. It kind of has that because it's a band of these fibers that are kind of getting broken up. And so that's what you can look for the internal capsule.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not as much of a bold white as the other corona radiata are.
When they first did the section, they just also
Other questions?
given different names.
Cool.